Hello everyone and welcome back to the good stuff. We are back at the 1857 First American Chess Congress and it's Game 8, Louis Paulsen versus Paul Charles Morphy. So Morphy is leading. Morphy won 4 games, 1 game was lost, for Morphy, and 2 games were drawn. So let's see what happens in Game 8. Paulsen opens with e4 and Morphy once again replies with e5. We have knight f3, knight to c6 and knight to c3 now, inviting the 4 knights. We have knight to f6. The 4 knights game is on the board, and now d4 by Paulsen. We have bishop to b4 by Morphy, developing and pinning the knight, and bishop to b5 now. So pretty symmetrical opening. Knight captures on e4 by Morphy, and now queen to d3. Defending the c3 knight twice, and it's a temporary pawn sacrifice. But Morphy now just replies with d5. He strengthens his knight on e4 and keeps the tension on the board. Paulsen grabs his pawn back. We have knight captures on e5, and here we have castles by Morphy. And it is as of move 7 that this position was never reached again. And here, Paulsen also castles. It's very important to castle early and often, as the quote above the board says. Here, a lot of things could go wrong. For example, if you don't castle and you play something like a3, you want to clear up the situation in front of your king. Do you see how black takes advantage of this? It's quite a nifty idea, so feel free to pause the video and figure out how to do this while I give you a couple of seconds. For those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting that. I don't even know how to phrase this, but congratulations to everyone who did it. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it's either bishop captures on c3 or just knight captures on e5 right away. The move order doesn't really matter. Point is that after knight captures on e5, captures, you're going to capture on c3. B pawn has to capture as the knight guards the c3 square, and now you play c6. And now after bishop to a4, which is the only move if you don't want to lose a piece, bishop to a4, now you play knight captures on f2. And after, let's say, king captures, queen to h4 check, king has to move, and now you just pick up the bishop here, and White's position is completely busted, and you will have an awesome game here. So like I said, a lot of things can go wrong, so Paulsen just castles, and now Morphy goes for the exact same setup. Knight captures on e5, we have d captures, bishop captures on c3, b captures, and now c6. We have bishop to a4, and okay, now you don't have the knight captures on f2, but that's f2, but still it's a very promising position for Morphy. And queen here with the idea of just grabbing here and maybe picking up the bishop, then just bishop b3 doesn't really do all that much for black, but it is playable. Morphy decides to go, as this is a very important game. If he wins it, he wins the First American Chess Congress. He goes for queen to a5 instead. He creates a double attack here, a double attack on the c3 pawn while attacking the bishop on a4. So bishop back to b3, and now just queen captures on c3. Morphy will gladly trade queens here, as he's up a pawn. He has 2 pawn islands to Paulsen's 3 pawn islands, and he feels very confident that he can win this. We have bishop to f4 by Paulsen, now defending the e5 pawn, and bishop to f5 by Morphy. Continuing development, also if the knight moves, there could be some tricks. So as the queen is on this diagonal, and now rook to c1 by Paulsen. It's not easy to actually find a move here. Trading queens will never be good for you. For example, if queen captures on c3, you're just gonna recapture, and now after you have to move the bishop. Knight e2 check is the threat that will just eliminate the bishop. So after the bishop moves, knight e2 check, your king is gonna move, and now let's say rook fd8, and the black has an excellent game. Not much to do here with white. White does have the bishop pair, although this bishop is basically a pawn for the moment, so not much to be done about that. So after bishop to f5 by Morphy, rook a to c1, probably to help out with the defense of the c2 pawn at some point. It might become an issue. However, Morphy shows that this is not a great place for the rook by playing g5. And g5 is a really nice idea. It says, okay, you either march your bishop back, and then I just grab more space. Your bishop will no longer be controlling the e5 pawn, so I can eliminate the pawn. And Paulsen is reluctant to give yet another pawn to Morphy. And the problem is, it does seem like you can capture the queen, and after knight captures back, then the g5 pawn is no longer defended. However, after Paulsen played this, queen captures on c3, knight captures and bishop captures on g5. Now Morphy just has knight to e2 check, forking the king and the rook. So by avoiding the loss of yet another pawn, Paulsen agrees to give up the exchange. So king h1, Morphy grabs the rook, knight captures on c1, bishop recaptures. A rook recaptures, not bishop. After knight captures, rook recaptures the knight, and here we have rook f to e8. Now putting pressure on the pawn here, bishop to f6 defending. And it's not the end of the world. Paulsen still has the bishop pair. However, as long as this bishop is a pawn, that's not the way to use your bishop pair. And now b5 by Morphy. He's preparing to go a5 and a4 to trap the light square bishop. With f3, Morphy continues with a5, and now a3. Of course, you don't want your bishop trapped. Bishop back to e6, now creating a very nifty idea. Rook to d1, now preventing c5 because you will lose the d5 pawn, but now b4 by Morphy. And now it's not at all clear. If you push the a4 pawn, at some point you can just start pushing the c pawn, so the position will not remain closed. Morphy will get his open files for the rook. Bishop to a4 seems like maybe a decent try, but again, after rook to c8 doesn't leave white with much. So instead, Paulsen just captured on b4. We have a captures on b4, and now h3. Just trying to improve the position a little bit, but now Morphy finds a brilliant idea. Morphy plays c5 here, and it's the same in every game. Paulsen really takes a lot of time for his moves, and the Morphy very rarely takes more than 5 minutes. Most of the moves he played were played in under a minute. And here, it's wonderful that he's giving up the d5 pawn, but actually taking the d5 pawn is super complicated, because after bishop captures on d5, you get rook 8 to d8. You offer a rook. This is just incredible stuff. And now you either capture it or you try c4 to defend your bishop. It doesn't really matter. Let's say captures en passant. You're going to give up the rook, and after, before rook captures, you're going to play c2, attack the rook, move the rook back, and only now capture on d8. And now the problem is, white doesn't have time for captures, because rook to d1 check wins the game. So what white would have to do is just say, okay, I don't have time for that, I have to eliminate the passed pawn, and then you just pick up the bishop, you're up a piece, and of course in a completely winning game. So really problematic move for Paulsen, this c5 idea by Morphy. Paulsen tries c3, not much to go on, but Morphy captures it, b captures on c3. He doubles his pawns, but now it's a strong passed c pawn. With bishop to c2, Paulsen blocks it, but now just rook to a2 by Morphy. With rook to c1, and now rook e to a8, doubling up here, preparing rook to a1. Bishop to g5 now, keeping an eye on the rook here, but still rook to a1, not much to be done here. Bishop to b1 blocking, and now, of course, you all see Morphy's next move without even pausing the video, as it's, well, it's just out there. So congratulations everyone for seeing it. It's, of course, c2, and it was in this position on move 29 that Louis Paulsen resigned the game, and yet another victory for Paul Charles Morphy in the First American Chess Congress in the finals. Here he resigns because if you capture it with the rook, you just lose a piece. Rook captures here, and if you don't, if you capture it with the bishop, then it's just rook captures, bishop captures, and rook to a1. Now again, winning material. King h2, you're just gonna capture here, and once the bishop moves, again we end up in a Jan Gustafsson endgame where one player is up a rook. So really impressive play by Morphy. In the end, it was quite a struggle. If it wasn't for that game two, that really put Morphy in depression mode, I think the result would be much higher in Morphy's favor. Here the result ends in 6-2 in Morphy's favor, as 5 games were won by Morphy, 2 games were drawn, and 1 game was won by Paulsen. But you know, it's hard to say. But that game too really put a number on Morphy, and he really had needed two games to get out of it. So what happens now is that, of course, they are the first American Chess Congress has finished. They are presented with their prizes, and since Morphy refused to accept money for chess, he never accepted money for any chess, any prize that he won. Even if you had to put up some prizes to attract another chess player for a match, he would still decline it, even if the other player got money. So here, all the other participants got their money. First place was won by Morphy, second place, of course, by Paulsen, third place Lichtenhain, and fourth place by Raphael. And everyone got money prizes except Morphy. He received a silver plate in the amount of $300. That was the first prize. And although $300 may not seem like a lot of money, in 1857, I've used an online inflation calculator to crunch the numbers. What would $300 in 1857 be worth today? It's about $9,000. So basically, of purchasing power. So basically, that's how fancy that silver plate was. And also, I would just like to read to you what was engraved on that silver plate. So it says, "This service of plate is presented to Paul Morphy, the victor in the grand tournament at the first Congress of the American National Chess Association, New York, 1857." So that was presented to him. And also, I would like to mention that Steinitz in 1885 spoke of Morphy and this competition in his in the International Chess Magazine. Steinitz said that this whole idea of Morphy being unbeatable was a bit overhyped, and he used exactly game 2, where Morphy switched the move order, where he grabbed the queen and delivered check on g6 before actually capturing the knight, to present that even Morphy can make a mistake. But what he didn't know while writing that was that Morphy really made that move instantly, whereas Paulsen thought for some 35 minutes before Morphy made his, so-called blunder. The game was drawn in the end. But still, that's what Steinitz used, and it is known that Steinitz did not know this detail that Morphy pretty much played his moves instantly. But when it came to praising Morphy, Steinitz also praised Morphy. For example, regarding Game 6, the legendary Game 6 against Paulsen, Steinitz said that it was really a masterpiece. He put it on the front page of the chess instructor, the modern chess instructor, and it said that it was printed in gold. So that's how much he praised Morphy for that one. So really a lot of interesting stuff. And also, I would just like to read one small part from David Lawson's book on Paul Morphy regarding McDonald's view of Morphy in his book Chess Life Pictures. So here it said he described Morphy and his manner of playing, having witnessed many of his games when in England. His smile was delightful. It seemed to kindle up the brain fuel that fed his eyes with light, and it made them shoot forth most brilliant rays. He moved very fast, but never hurriedly. He never put his hand near a piece until he was going to move it, nor placed any of them inexactly on the board so as to leave his antagonist doubtful as to its position, never swooped down upon a piece he was going to capture, nor described an atmospheric arc with his arm previous to making the coup that was to strike the spectators with wonder, or ensure for him the victory. Morphy generally kept his eyes fixed instantly upon the board while he was playing. Yet, like the gentleman Henry T. Buckle, he always looked up from it as soon as he had a winning game, but never with an exulting or triumphant gaze. He seldom, in fact, in my presence, never expended more than a minute or two over his best and deepest combinations. He never seemed to exert himself, much less to cudgel his brains, but played with consummate ease, as though his moves were the result of inspiration. I fancy he always discerned the right move at a glance, and only paused before making it, partly out of respect for his antagonist and partly to certify himself of its correctness, to make assurance doubly sure, and to accustom himself to sobriety of demeanor in all circumstances. I fully agree with Mr. Boden's opinion that he possessed a truly gigantic capacity for chess that was never fully called forth, because even its partial development sufficed to enable him to triumph over all opponents. That's what McDonald said. So some people often say that Morphy, he's an interesting guy, but he wasn't all that strong. I mean, his opponents weren't all that impressive. But that's what it is. Magnus Carlsen is where he is because his opponents require that of him. If he wants to beat them, he has to be that good. Morphy had to be this good to win the first American Chess Congress, and that's why he was that good. That's something to also put in perspective. So yeah, what happens next? Morphy is now the winner of the first American Chess Congress, and Mr. Willard Fisk receives a letter from Howard Staunton of England, where he says that he was following all the games, he enjoyed all the games, and that he thinks that in the future maybe a contest could be organized between Morphy and himself. And Morphy and Fisk started discussing about this whole idea of maybe traveling to England and maybe traveling to Europe, visiting some other countries, because okay, the players in the first American Chess Congress were strong, but they're not exactly strong as the players in Europe. The European chess masters were much stronger and much more famous. So this is where we will stop this video, as in the next video we are going to continue. Morphy is traveling to Europe, and we'll just take it from there. So yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. We wrapped up the first American Chess Congress, so now you know a little bit more how he came there, how they had who he defeated, how they had the awesome chess party, you know, the match against Paulsen. If you've never really covered it, or maybe went through the games, you know, you maybe thought, okay, Morphy just completely destroyed Paulsen, but not really. You know, Paulsen did have his moments. So just putting it out there. But yeah, I do hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank Manuel Martinez, Taras Karpiak, Jeff Graves, Cameron Ford, and John Lynch for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the Morphy saga, checking up on your wonderful suggestions, and of course, whatever else happens in the chess world. So thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.